I was in my old elementary school. Only, everything was white. I was lost, and I didn't know how to get back to my classroom. Someone is using the school broadcasting system and muttering something that I don't understand. Yet, my feet still move on their own, trying to get out of this unfamiliar part of the school. So, I run away from something that I can't see, and as I run, I see the library in front of me starts to blossom in color. Thinking that I had found a way out, I run into that library and lock the door. Breathing a sigh of relief, I start reading, sitting down, shoulders leaning on a bookshelf. But suddenly, I feel a cold, sharp metal trail up against my back. I don't feel the pain, but I feel a very threatening presence behind me. As I look back to see, I instantly know that I'll die then and there. Then I wake up. That was one of the entries from the dream journal I keep. Of course, since it's a dream, I'd probably forgotten a lot of the details. But I can still recall the feeling of the knife against my back, and the fact that, even though I didn't see him, the man that was about to kill me had long black hair. I have nightmares like these all the time, and most of the time, I remember them like I actually went through them mere seconds before. Now, raise your hand if you have nightmares, or if you remember any. Quite a lot of you. So, some people, like my brother, doesn't remember the details of his nightmares, just the fear that he has towards them. But a lot of other people, like me, remember nightmares far more vividly than other dreams. So, try guessing how much of all dreams are nightmares. 20%, 30%, maybe even half. Well, according to a study by Quebec's Université de Montréal, done on about 10,000 dreams, only 2.9, I repeat, 2.9% of all dreams are nightmares. When I first came across this data, I found it very hard to believe. We distinctly remember nightmares, and we fear them so much, but yet they're such a minuscule portion of all of our dreams. That means that the effects nightmares have, or that be the plot, the emotions we feel, the situations we find ourselves in, or the raw fear that we have towards them, are very powerful, as they're the main dreams we remember, despite seeing them so little times. I grew intrigued about the nature of these nightmares when I was 14, after seeing intense nightmares for 3 weeks straight. We tend to think of nightmares as just an unfortunate disturbance to our sleep, but yet I couldn't convince my sleep-deprived self to conclude my experiences with nightmares as just that. There's got to be something more to nightmares, I thought. So I came up with 3 questions that I wanted to investigate. 1, how do we come up with nightmares? 2, how can we stop fearing them? And 3, since they're so powerful, can we use nightmares for something positive? So to start with, what are nightmares and dreams? Not the scientific kind, but symbolically. Psychologists have tried to answer this very question for centuries, but one of the most famous theories is Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic dream theory. Freud argued that all dreams are a form of wish fulfillment, and that our hidden desires or the thoughts that we often suppress appear in the form of dreams. This theory is certainly an interesting one, but from my personal experience, I don't dream about the things I want, but rather the things that I don't want. For example, I'd see my intrusive thoughts reflected in my dreams or nightmares. So instead, with a little inspiration from Freud, I come up with my own theory on dreams. That dreams are a collection of fragments our brains randomly gets inspired by, brought together by our differing mental states and suppressed thoughts. With this logic, nightmares can occur when we have bad mental health or are in a negative headspace. There was a dream where I woke up in a cold sweat room that I find ridiculous now that I think about it. Do you know those wooden mazes or contraptions they have in Pythagoras Switch, the one on the screen? I was in there, running into those wooden planks, and I was running frantically away from this tiny iron ball, afraid that I'd be squished and die. Which is ridiculous, this ball is so tiny, but it felt so real, like I was actually in one of the games from Squid Game. I had this nightmare when I went through depression 2 years ago, like my theory would predict. During this time, I was having different nightmares every day, most of them involving death or running away or some sort of weapon. Actually, the insert I read in the beginning of me being killed in the library was from this period of my life. Losing too much sleep and determined to find out what was wrong, I started writing and recording in a journal about what I felt, what I saw, and what was going on in my life when I had a particular nightmare.
As I filled the pages, I was able to track the trends and the connections between the things that appeared in my dream and the things I was experiencing in real life. For example, I saw the news about a whale dying one day, and it appeared as a lovely feature in the nightmare that I had the night after.
Although I didn't actually get squished when I woke up from that rolling ball dream that I just talked about, I had been studying for my final exams that time, and I was nervous if I could finish studying in time for the test or not. So I knew that my mental state influenced the occurrence of nightmares. But how do these nightmares become so personalized and so impactful to fit our fears and worries?
As I explained before, dreams are the byproduct of your brain being inspired by random things you usually don't get inspired by or don't bother thinking twice about. For example, I saw the news about a whale dying one day, and it appeared as a lovely feature in the nightmare that I had the night after.
According to psychologist William Kilgore of Harvard Medical School, this can be well explained by the concept of binding errors, which is a term used to explain how the waking brain is orderly, while the sleeping brain thinks in fragments. The fragments that the sleeping brain extracts from the waking brain often do not assemble in a correct way deemed by the waking brain. So the brain desperately tries to make sense of these fragments by creating a cohesive narrative, which then becomes a dream or nightmare. If you inspect one of your dreams very closely, you can find a collection of fragments that you might have seen, heard, or thought in your waking life reflected in your dreams or nightmares. That meant that when I had a terrifying nightmare, my brain was conjuring up random parts of the day and the latest words I had, and making them into the most realistic, relevant, scary story that I could see that day. So, how did I, and how could you, stop fearing nightmares? As I said, I keep a dream journal by my bedside, and whenever I have an interesting dream or a scary nightmare, I write down the key details in that journal. It's messy, and some aren't even in sentences, but it's enough for me to recall certain scenes that stuck out to me. It's a collection of bizarre events my mind conjures. It's just fun writing in it, thinking about how ridiculous it all is. But what I'm ultimately doing with this exercise, besides from saving inspiration, is breaking down and studying these nightmares for a couple minutes, separating the fear from the existence of nightmares.
I used to ignore all my nightmares, but that made me even more scared of going to sleep because I didn't know what was coming.
Now, instead of trying not to think about it and letting it consume me, I think about how interesting it is that my mind comes up with a horror film specifically tailored to me. I trace the components of my nightmares back to things that I might have been worrying about, or the things that I saw the day or week before, and the fear starts to dissolve. I now know what the brain might be working with, so it prepares me for the kind of nightmares that I might see that night. It's always best to be in a positive mental headspace, so we don't have any nightmares. But since our mental state fluctuates every day, that is hard sometimes. So it's important to know how to lessen the stress and use the stress for a positive purpose. For example, I use the feelings in my nightmares in creative areas like playing the piano. When playing Chopin's Waltz Opus 64 No. 2, there's a part where the music speeds up and the melody starts to tumble down. Oddly enough, when I hear him play it, I imagine myself running away from that metal ball that I mentioned earlier. Well, not quite, but the feeling of running away while the floor is moving, that sense of urgency, gives a unique touch to that particular piece I play. I write prequels and sequels to the scenes that I see in my dreams as a creative writing exercise as well. Starting from a scene that's burned into my mind, or a distinct feeling, I start thinking about how the dream could have ended. Because, as we know, we usually wake up in the middle of a dream, not at the end of it. In fact, many famous creatives have used dreams as a source of inspiration. Paul McCartney came up with the melody for Yesterday, a song by the Beatles, in a dream. J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, came up with the series after daydreaming the iconic scene on platform 93 quarters. Stephen King actually used his own nightmares as inspiration for his popular horror novels. It's a waste not to use creative, organic inspiration like dreams or nightmares. They never end, and they allow you to think literally outside of our usual thought patterns. In a world where creativity is becoming your number one asset, the nightmares you fear and the dreams you might think are irrelevant can be a valuable source of inspiration. With this power, you can even push through any time you're feeling uninspired. When you're in an art block or writer's block, as artists and writers call it, with the help of dreams. There's a key detail that I haven't touched upon yet. We forget our dreams very easily. So how do you remember your dreams? Well, you can recall them by writing in a journal like me, or talking to someone about them. You can even talk to yourself too. It's a simple effort of trying to remember, trying to notice these fragments or sources of inspiration that makes a key difference. The scenes or feelings in your dreams are very easy to use for creative purposes because it came out of you, and just thinking about your dream gets your brain into a normal thinking pattern. You'll think of something that you ordinarily won't think of. Dreams and nightmares are updating and changing with you, which makes them such a great, sustainable source of inspiration. I hope that from tonight, you stop fearing your nightmares, and instead you start waking up to inspiration, powered by your own creative mind. Thank you.